Okay, I'm live. I'm live. I'm actually kind of really looking forward to this live stream. I know it's been a little while, folks, since I've done a live stream. Actually, going to be getting real heavy back into the work here shortly. So I've been trying to tie up some loose ends, to be honest with you. Some I've been getting around to, some still procrastinate, but I'm getting some things done anyways. But like I say, I've been kind of away from the live stream. But as you folks know, I mean, anyone that follows any of my social media accounts, when I'm not live streaming, it definitely does not mean that I'm not active. I'm constantly active. I'm just more selective, and I pick the time frames and the kind of things that I typically advocate for, promote, support, that kind of stuff. And I've been doing a lot of actually. I might as well just mention right now, I entered into a contest on ThinkSpot, and shout out to not just Jordan Peterson and Nancy and Nathan and all the great folks that are part and parcel of ThinkSpot. Well, I believe it was Jordan Peterson was the original guy that I think he might have been one of the original investors in the space. Not 100% sure on that, but like I say, Nancy, Nathan, all the fine folks over at ThinkSpot. Not only is it a great place to actually go to, and you don't have to worry about. That's the thing with a lot of these social media platforms. It's a lot of knuckle draggers out there that just want to bring you down to their level. But over on ThinkSpot, the name is quite applicable, right? There's a lot of thinking type people, and you get some really, really good discourse, some pushback, but in a friendly and a cordial manner. And once again, I, for one, really appreciate that, because I don't mind being challenged, but yeah, just don't be a fucking dick about it, right? But yeah, I like the fine folks over there. But the contest that's going on, I submitted my own essay. It's actually an essay that regarding education, and because what education, folks, is one of the key drivers, one of the main contributors, and one of the dominant factors in why things are so crazy these days, right? I mean, that is people well, they say where you get educated, and to a degree, you do get educated. I can't deny any education whatsoever, but with a lot of that education, you get a whole lot of indoctrination, a lot of ideological premises kind of shoved down your throat, right? And that's actually kind of part and parcel of the kind of stuff we're going to be talking about today too. So it kind of ties into all of this. And I just got to say, first and foremost, before I even start into this, is I got to say, I have a tremendous amount of respect, not just for Jordan Peterson, but for the two individuals, actually both professors in universities, I believe, both in Ontario. I believe one is Laurier. I think David Haskell, I believe he's a professor at Laurier, if I remember correctly. I think Bruce Pardy is at U of T. Anyways, both professors, and obviously, even they themselves have come around to acknowledging that the very institutions that they function in is kind of turned away from the ideas of, personal freedom, independent liberty, freedom of thought, freedom of expression, all that stuff. And we know all about the crazy wokeness. But once again, now both of these gentlemen are taking two different sides of this debate. But like I say, regardless, I got to say, I have a tremendous amount of respect for both David and Bruce Pardy, because at the very least, they're both out there presenting their case and willing to engage in the battle of ideas, right? It's just friendly. It's just words, folks. So I use that term battle quite loosely, but we're talking about just engaging in challenging each other's premises or ideas. And of course, the question for this particular debate is the most important thing is, basically, what is the role of government, right? Is it to defend or promote virtue, or is it to defend and promote freedom? Now, David Haskell has taken the virtue side, and Bruce has taken the freedom side. And once again, I've already watched this, but we're going to deal with it all entirely. But I think both gentlemen did a great job in presenting their cases. And I will just say this as well. Just because, as you see during this whole, as it unfold, one side I'm kind of leaning towards more than the other, but I also got to point this out, right? The other side may very well just have, I'm not sure, I can't say with any amount of certainty, but one side may have taken up the mantle of playing devil's advocate. One side of the debate might not even be fully entrenched and a full-on believer in the stance or the position he took. And once again, that's great because a person should, an independent, critically thinking person should be able to steelman both sides of any argument and be able to challenge either side for anything that either side takes, and which is great. That's what raises and elevates our intellect and our discourse, is being able to engage in these amazing debates, while at the same time, not looking at it as a zero-sum game where I'm going to one up this person, right? It's not a hockey game. No, it's about everybody evolving their mindset, right? And being open to hearing things that maybe you have been privy to in the past, which is actually a sad part for those on I guess that want to identify as on the left, or the collectivist types, or the wokesters, right? There's a part of me that actually feels really bad for a lot of these folks, because you can tell that they don't have access to, or are not privy to, the kind of intellectual vigor that the proponents of classical liberalism or libertarian thought, or even some old school type of conservatism are privy to. It's a very lopsided thing these days when you see it. And once again, I feel bad for the wokesters, right? Or the people who are being sucked into that ideology. I just wish that someone in their lives would present them with alternative information, and in a manner that's conducive with actually trying to entice them rather than push them away further. But anyways, without further ado, actually, let me just read a couple comments in the chat here before I get right on here. David, what's going on, my friend? I would choose freedom over whatever is meant by virtue, especially if it's anything like virtue signaling. Right on, David. Well, thank you once again for joining the live stream, and I really appreciate that. Hey, what's up? Anyways, like I said, I'm just going to kind of delve into it. I could read the article, but actually, I think I was going to just start out with one particular video, and then I'll get to the actual article. And this is something, actually, before I even get into the debate, that I wanted to play a little snip, a little segment, a few minutes of this. This is from Jordan Peterson's YouTube channel. It's that heading is Bill C-63, Everything You Need to Know. Bruce Pardy, Konstantin Kisin. And once again, Konstantin Kisin, I'm sure you folks are familiar with his podcast Trigonometry that he does with his co-host. Anyways, he's been another person that I've found that's kind of not real new. He's been around the space for a little while, but fairly new in comparison to people like myself. And like I say, coming from totally different backgrounds and histories, but this is the one area that I'm kind of happy to see in terms of those who are challenging the status quo in the current establishment, is they are truly, quite diverse in their background, their heritage, their history. But the one common thing that they all share is this belief in individual liberty, right? And that, to me, like that, if you have that at least as the basis, then of course you're the kind of person that I would love to engage with. And I'm glad that I'm seeing so many different people, like I say, from different backgrounds that are coming together today and really, really hammering out these ideas and genuinely giving each other some serious pushback, which, once again, this kind of competitive type of pushback from each other, but in a friendly manner. Wow, it's really raising and elevating the discourse and the kind of conversation that, once again, folks like us are privy to. And I, for one, am very grateful. But anyways, I just wanted to cover this little section, like I say, probably about 5, maybe 6. Well, we'll see how long it goes from this particular video, this particular YouTube video that is up on Jordan Peterson's page. I think it's not just YouTube. I'm quite certain you can find it on Rumble. As with a lot of people these days, we all have Rumble channels in addition to our YouTube channels. So let me just, like I say, just get this started out here. I'll bring it on. Actually, let me bring it on to the onto the stream. Just double check and make sure everything is going well. By the way, really appreciate all you folks that do or have already taken the time out to check out this live stream. Actually, before I do, just because X, formerly known as Twitter, doesn't send out notifications, I am going to actually just let people know that I am live over there right now. So I'll go to my profile. Here we go. Oh, wait, I got to go back here. Okay. I'm live. Whoops. Okay. And there goes that. Actually, yeah, yes, I forgot. I got a little bit more housekeeping to do, folks. Bear with me, be patient. But yeah, I did just remember that I've got to check out. Okay, there we go. So yeah, it's going good over on the YouTube. We're up and running on the YouTube. Just going to check and make sure everything's good on Rumble here as well. Like I say, get all my ducks in order. Might as well check out Odyssey. Because yeah, this is being live streamed. This is being live streamed to X, Odyssey, YouTube, and Rumble. All Canadian Libertarian channels, of course. Okay, and yeah, so we're good. We're good on Rumble as well. So everything is going good. So yeah, we can get back to the matter at hand. Oh. Yes, I definitely agree with Benjamin Franklin's wise words, right, in that particular area. Okay, so like I said, let me just play a little bit here. Oh.
Yeah, the universities are a main source of all the trouble, and they've been graduating generations of students who have these ideas in their heads. And not just lawyers, but people of all kinds, right? Who now occupy the professions and the governments and the public schools, and
they certainly make up the managerial class.
Exactly so. And the managerial class is our elite. People think that our elite are the widely successful entrepreneurs, and there are a few of those. But our actual elite is the managerial class, the ones who decide,
ones like getting honked at in Ottawa.
Exactly. The ones who decide how society.
So basically, just right off the bat, I mean, this right here is a beautiful thing, because once again, both of these men come from academia, and they're both basically making the acknowledgement that it's basically their institutions, or those who are part and parcel of their institutions, or other, branches of government, or even some of this 3P, public, private, and any of these institutions that are either funded or cozying up very closely to big government, and predominantly those who actually function in the public sector, the bureaucratic, right, the administrative state, are the very people, right, who we're talking about for the most part here. And that is really a fundamentally important thing to point out, because, before you can solve any problem, right, well, first, obviously you have to acknowledge that there is a problem, but then you actually understand where's the root cause of these problems. And it's very pleasant to know that these great folks, these great minds, actually have a firm grasp and understand at this point where the problem actually arises from, what the root source is for a lot of these ills in society. Now, not that they are all and solely to blame, but definitely a root cause and a root source. Anyway, so let me just play a little bit more here.
And he's going to run. And those people are, and their interests, though the interest of those individual people are in having this system carry on. And that includes a lot of the lawyers.
I mentioned the problem I had with you, and problem I had with you is that you don't make a very convincing right-wing crackpot. Well, I mean that, you don't fit the mold, because the logical thing to do, to assume if someone is standing up against the consensus, generally speaking, is that they're wrong. Now, sometimes they're right, right? And that's the problem.
Right.
And, you've always struck me as, let's say, suspiciously reasonable, right? In the way that the demagogue types just aren't. And so, and you've already explained why your view on such things, which you did make evident, and in a really minority fashion. I'm trying to think of other lawyers that I knew, certainly university lawyers. There was no university lawyers. No members of faculties of law at universities had anything to do with me in Canada. It was you, and that was it. And you played devil's advocate, which I thought was very funny.
Actually, that's another really important factor to take into consideration too, because especially for young people or people who are maybe not, privy to a lot of this knowledge or this stuff that's been taking place or the culture war, right? If they're not neck deep into it, you kind of got to forgive the masses, the unsuspecting masses, like the silent majority, for typically believing that, if the majority of people are thinking one way and it's only a very select, tiny minority of people who are thinking the other, sometimes you can kind of make an excuse or at least forgive them for thinking, well, geez, how can all of these people be wrong, right? While just these few people are right. Well, I mean, you folks have heard me give the examples of whether you're talking about, Galileo, right? Or any of the figures in the past. And I won't get into that stuff, but where it is the individual, right? But that is the point. That's one of the most important points of the Western or the classical liberal ethos or the libertarian ethos, which is that places the individual at the core, or even Christianity, right? Even the teachings of the Bible places the individual at the core of society, right? And that's the thing, because yes, at some times, right, the mob may very well be in the know and it might be the individual who's in the wrong, but there's no guarantee that is always or forever will be the case. And that's another very important thing to take into consideration.
Once I figured out what was going on. But, okay, so why do you think you can see this? Why are you willing to see this? And what distinguishes you in your training, your outlook, from the other lawyers who apparently aren't or won't?
Oh, I don't know. I can't tell you that. I'm not inside their heads. I don't really know. I've always been suspicious of government. I was suspicious of government authority ever since I can remember. I think when I was in public school, I thought, how awful to have this person at the front of the class who's not that smart and yet has power over me.
So some underlying suspicion of authority as such.
Sure.
Right. But you still went off through university to.
Well, I wanted to go to law school, not first.
Which I got to tell you, folks, that is one thing that I think I have noticed, that we libertarians or anarchists or volunteers, which only makes sense, right? Definitely share in common, is a definite apprehension and unwillingness to just blindly trust, people in positions of authority, especially people who are in positions of so-called authority, who use force, violence, coercion, and theft as their means to an end. Yeah. And that's just, whether you're talking about the state of nature, that's just a wise stance to take, right? As far as I'm concerned anyways, but continue on.
And foremost, to be a lawyer. I wanted to go to law school to find out what the rules were so that I could tell people who wanted to interfere with me what the rules are. I had to back off.
Right. I see.
And
that's a different motivation.
What I discovered was there are no such rules. There are no such rules, as it turns out, that prevents government authorities from backing off, because the whole system is designed to give them authority to do that.
So how did you manage with that attitude to have a successful career in academia in faculty of law? I mean, you've had a very successful career. You have you're actually not canceled even.
That's true.
Yeah. So how do you survive at Queen's or even thrive? And how did you manage to have this attitude and also manage a career in that environment?
I think you have to enjoy the exercise of trying to figure things out and then point it out, even if the people you're pointing it out to aren't listening. I know that doesn't sound like very much.
Well, but that usually just gets people canceled.
Well, not if you do it in a certain way.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
What's the way?
You can never make it personal. It's not about that person over there who thinks X. They can think whatever they want. See, I'm an actual libertarian. I think it's fine if people believe what they believe and they want to do what they want to do. I'm totally fine with that.
I want to torture you about that.
So this right here, this obviously, folks, I mean, this part for me in particular was really, really important thing to hear. And not just I'm not just pleased to know that Bruce identifies as a libertarian, because during the debate, which we're going to definitely get to, he more or less, I think the position was, or what he identified as classical liberal, which is very closely in line. Once again, classical liberals, we libertarians tend to get along with them quite well, because they're quite untrusting of government as well. The problem is that little area that whether you're talking about classical liberals or even conservatives that leave out is this, they still leave this pretense that somehow the government is the thing that you need, right? Libertarians, like I say, come to firmly grasp and understand that no, that it's the exact opposite. Actually, if you're worried about people that are going to do terrible things, right? Which of course there are people that are going to do terrible things. That's going to be reality no matter what timeline or time frame you live in. But what's the one last thing that you want to give people who are seeking out power or control or a means to manipulate or to coerce or to steal or to plunder or to use fraud against people? Well, you don't want to give them some pretense that they're doing it under the guise of legality or worse still, morality, right? That's where we get into the problem. I understand the forefathers of the past or the classical liberals that left a little bit of holdout for the state and saying, well, listen, this will be our basically our arbitrator, our referee as such, right? The problem is if you give the referee all the power, maybe for a while he might just stick to just being the referee. But once he realizes that he's got all the power, well, that corrupting nature is omnipresent and always around us. Anyways, I'm going to continue on.
If their opinion is diametrically opposed to mine, I'm totally fine with that. The only moments when I have trouble with it is when they start to step on my toes. But as long as they're not doing that, I'm cool. I'm cool. Right. And this is one of the things I think that distinguishes, and you know what? Libertarian has become a bad label because the libertarians did very, very badly during COVID. Very bad. Yeah. They dropped the ball horribly.
Now, I will just say this. I was hoping he was going to expand on that, but he kind of moved on quickly. But I really, really, really wish, and maybe I'll reach out to Bruce actually one day, because we do follow each other on X. And actually, I should probably ask Bruce. Actually, I probably will do that now that I think about it. Is what in the heck did you mean by the libertarians dropped the ball during COVID? Because I got to tell you, this libertarian right here, this individual named Bennett Hunter, the Canadian Libertarian, I was out in front of it before mostly everyone, and anyone that follows my content knows full well. Plus, you don't even have to trust me. Just look through my past YouTube videos and live streams, going all the way back to, I think one of the first ones I did was in February or March of 2020, where I was already pointing out, some of the bullshit rhetoric and the manipulations of facts and statistics that already had me on heightened alert. And once again, I was consistent in my stance and my principles throughout the entire timeline and taking full defense, while once again acknowledging that yes, vulnerable people need to be protected. So I think I'll just give myself a little pat on the back, but I think I was there as a libertarian. So I'm not sure what libertarians he was talking to. But once again, try not to collectivize us libertarians because we're quite independent, obviously. But anyways, going to continue on here.
And it turns out they have a lot of strange ideas. So I tend not to use that label anymore, but I understand what I mean. But there's a huge divide between the libertarian-minded people, or the liberals, I can use that word, liberals, the original classical liberals, and the conservatives. And in a sense, you're standing astride the chasm between these two groups, right? Because the conservatives have a lot of them have a very clear idea about what they think is right. Fair enough. People should have an idea about what they think is right. And the classical liberals know what they think about the law. And the mistake, for my money, that the conservatives make is that they fail to distinguish between two different questions. The first question, which is entirely legitimate, which is, what should people do? How should people behave? Okay, let's hear how you think people should behave. Totally fine with that. The next question is not the same question, which is, How must people behave? There's a conservative inclination to want to take their philosophy and make it into law and to make people do what they think is right. Now,
Right. And that's often what made the conservatives, what would you say,
yes,
undesirable to
yes,
the more classic liberal types. That
Yes.
was the place that put.
Okay, anyways, folks. So I'm going to bring this off because once again, this is the part I think we covered. What was it? Probably about 7 minutes of that. Anyways, and like I say, I do want to get to the actual debate at hand, and I will mention not only is this going to be linked in the live stream, but I also have as well the actual original article that this whole debate started from. Actually, let me just play the Rand debate, and maybe we'll get to that. So let me bring this on. Start into it. Now there's already, I will just mention that there was already an introduction, some things that were said by a couple of the people at this particular institution where this debate took place. But I just basically fast forward to the point where we're getting to the actual debate here. But let me just start playing this here.
When we were thinking about this idea of a debate, we came across an article written by a law professor, Bruce Pardy. Some of you may know him. So Bruce Pardy wrote an article called Freedom and Virtue, Friends or Enemies. So you need to be careful when you're writing, Bruce, because you could end up having to debate it. And it was really eye-opening. And I'm just going to read just a couple of paragraphs so that it sets the tone and
What happened there now? All I did was change the quality. What happened here? Uh-oh. Where are we at here? Okay, just give me a sec here, folks. I'm not quite sure what happened there. Let me try reloading here. So what was that, around 22-minute mark, I believe? Oh, that was strange, wasn't it? Yeah, I believe it's around the 22-minute mark. Okay.
Haskell is a professor of religion and culture at Laurier University. He's been there for 20 years, and he recently wrote a piece.
Weirdly enough, I guess you can't change the quality once you start. Well, I'm going to try it before I actually start playing. How's that? Nope. Okay, so then let me just redo this. Okay, so I'm going to have to, it's still in decent quality, so I guess I'm just going to have to stick with the little bit lower quality here.
A lot of press, and I encourage you to have a look at it because he raises some very important points for all of us to keep in mind. And of course, Professor Bruce Pardy, law professor at Queen's University, who has been there for 24 years. And he's also the executive director of Rights Probe, and you can find more about his work at Rights Probe at rightsprobe.org. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome our debaters. So tonight we are going to be first having opening statements. David.
So basically, you folks, I think I went a little bit too fast beyond that. But anyway, so basically what this is, just to give you a heads up, and I have that linked in the description of the live stream as well, is this is in reference to a Brownstone Institute, Jeffrey Tucker, some great libertarian minds contribute to the Brownstone Institute, and Bruce Pardy had submitted his article to Brownstone, and it was posted and published in Brownstone Institute under the heading Freedom and Virtue, Friends or Enemies. This was by, like I say, Bruce Pardy, November 26, 2023. And once again, it will be definitely linked in the description of the video. And this whole debate is in reference to that and dealing with that very question. So without further ado, let me just get back to the debate.
Haskell is going to have his opening statement first, followed by Bruce Pardy. And then we're going to get into the formal debate soon after.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased to be here tonight because there's a problem and it needs solving. And I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that all Western civilization hangs in the balance. What you will hear tonight, what gets resolved tonight, where we fall on this issue, I truly believe determines if we fall as a society. Now, to avoid an accusation of hubris, let me assure you, I don't think that this particular debate alone has the power to influence the direction of the West or even Canadian society. But I think it's a crucial part of a larger conversation that needs to be had immediately because Western civilization is sick. It's been infected by a disease. Some call it critical social justice, others call it cultural Marxism, or simply wokeism. But this disease is eating away at the body politic, and it will soon consume everything. The symptoms of this disease, this wokeism, as they manifest in our schools, our government organizations, and even in our businesses, is unmistakable. Symptom one, we see the elevation of any culture, any identity, any values that are not rooted in the culture and identity and traditional values of the majority population. On the other hand, and we can call this symptom number two, we see the explicit degrading of the majority population and the values and the culture of their heritage. In particular, the ideas and values rooted in the Judeo-Christian tradition are uniquely demonized. A third major symptom of this wokeism is the rationalization or valorization of discrimination. It insists that discrimination is a good thing if applied against the majority population. So to my mind, those are the major symptoms of wokeism. And I believe that left untreated, the hostility and division it causes will increase until our nation dies. But if that is the disease, then what's the cure? What's the most effective cure? And by cure, I mean to say, what's the most effective ideological system to reverse, push back the damage of wokeism and restore our country? Because make no mistake, at its core, this battle for our country is a battle of ideological systems or worldviews. And if we want to win against this cancerous worldview of wokeism, we need to employ the strongest, most...
Actually, just give me 1 second, folks. I actually got a couple messages from Bruce Pardy in real time here. So I just kind of wanted to deal with them, actually, just in case there's something he wants to say that I might want to cover during this analysis. So Bruce says, "Hey Bennett, libertarians dropped the ball during COVID. I wasn't referring to you, not at all, or even libertarian-minded individuals. What I was referring to was the large-scale capitulation by the prominent libertarian think tanks, primarily American, like the Cato Institute." I get you there for sure, Bruce. "The main exceptions among the think tanks were the Mises Institute and AIER, whose leader at the time, Jeffrey Tucker, later created Brownstone to continue the fight." Yes, thank you very much for the clarification, Bruce. Really do appreciate that, my friend. And yeah, thanks. So I never thought for 1 second that you were specifically pointing at me, obviously, but really appreciate you reaching out and clarifying, and even taking the time out of your busy day to even check out my analysis. And once again, I will just say this, once again, that I, for one, am genuinely appreciative that you folks took the time to do this, because I think you both did an excellent job at articulating your thoughts, putting forth your premises, the positions. And I got to tell you, for yourself in particular, you're quite brave. And I know it's difficult. Trust me, I realize how difficult it is to utter such a words that maybe government isn't even legitimate, the things that they do, right? And this is the problem with the voluntarists, libertarians, anarchists, not Antifa, but I'm talking about people who just want to, have relationships socially, economically, fully voluntary, not use force, coercion, theft, fraud, as a means to it at their end. And it is a difficult thing because we live in a modern, it's like living back when religious dogma was dominant and running around telling people, maybe everything written in particular ideological book isn't 100% accurate. There might be some discrepancies. There may actually be some things in there that are quite immoral, not necessarily moral. That would be a difficult sell to a bunch of religious ideologues. And it's the same with telling statists today that the cult, the religion of statism, the belief system that was jammed into their head from very early on, from very early ages, is not based or built upon any of the things that you were told it was, right? There are actually contradictions in terms, right? Actually, government is the antithesis of individual liberty. And it's a difficult thing to try to explain to people. Believe me, I know this better than most. But I got to tell you, it's just like with me, with everything I've ever experienced in my life. I like to think of what helped me, right? What helped me and what helped most people that I've ever engaged and talked to. Yeah, you have to learn the cold, hard truth first and foremost, right? There can be a lot of banter back and forth. There can be lots of disagreements, all kinds of things. And I actively participate in these things. And actually, I enjoy engaging in these things as long as, once again, the baseline rules, hey, let's just not use violence and coercion and theft as our means to an end. And we'll try to figure this stuff out. We'll hammer it out, right? And that's a great basis for any social or economic cooperative endeavor is let's at least say, we're taking force off the table. And since government is force, as Bruce acknowledged himself, then that's the thing. When people say we should use government for, what they're really saying, what they're advocating for is we should use force as our means to an end. Anyways, I won't hog up the limelight here. Once again, I think most of that great stuff that was said and actually articulated probably even better than I could do so is already done so by these gentlemen and in particular Bruce. Nothing against David, and I'm hoping David gets a chance to watch this as well because, once again, tremendous amount of respect for both of you folks, and thanks for doing what you did. Okay, back to it, folks. Back to it. Thanks again for the clarification, Bruce.
Effective worldview to war against it and then replace it. Note that I said the most effective worldview. Tonight, you're going to hear about two competing cures for the disease of wokeism. You're going to hear about conservatism from me. In particular, the conservatism I'm advocating is of a very specific type. It's the conservatism that is rooted in the Judeo-Christian tradition, informed by British common law and native to all English-speaking countries. In very simple terms, as a political philosophy, the conservatism that I am advocating could be described like this. It's the virtues and values of Christianity, especially Protestant Christianity, applied to the governing of a country. I make special reference to Protestantism because it's from this religious tradition that conservatism from the UK and the US and Canada develops its strong tradition of individual liberty. Protestants fought to be able to believe and behave freely apart from their religious masters. Thus, liberty is a core characteristic.
Now, let me just say first and foremost, before I continue on, that David is absolutely correct in his assessment in terms of what Christianity, in particular, in terms of religion, has brought, modern Christianity, right? Post-Reformation, and especially in particular, when you're referencing the New Testament, right? And the stories contained within the New Testament are very much part and parcel of not just the Western ethos and the culture, but yes, even myself as someone who grew up in a Christian family and background, some of the great ethics and morals and teachings from the Bible, right? And the community leaders in terms of some of the church leaders, the pastors, right? The preachers, some, once again, at the individual level, some good, some bad, of course. But like I say, those things were very much about creating a cohesive, respectable, right? Polite, right? Friendly type of society. Not that it guaranteed bad things from happening. That nothing is going to do that. But I will definitely say that Christianity is definitely conducive with freedom and liberty. And I would even suggest that freedom alone and by itself is definitely not enough. But once again, let me just continue on. Actually, no, I won't even continue to say, because I think a lot of this stuff is actually, rather than me try to hog the limelight, let me let both of these gentlemen at least present their case, and then we'll kind of go and deal with it from there.
Of the conservatism I'm describing. And while conservatives in the Anglo-speaking countries are fierce defenders of freedom, they are guided by their religious tradition to balance their love of personal liberty with duty to family and duty to their nation. So with all of this in mind, I'll wrap up my definition of conservatism as a political philosophy. A government that leads according to conservative ideals will focus on the promotion of freedom, but it will be tempered by traditions of faith, protection of family, and the success of the nation. And this needs to be said. A conservative does not need to be religious, though many are, but they must support the virtues of the Judeo-Christian tradition because they recognize that they lead to the greatest societal success. So that's conservatism. From Bruce, you're going to hear about classical liberalism. Both worldviews have merit, but I'm going to show you that only one of these positive worldviews is strong enough medicine to heal the body politic and restore our nation. Conservatism, rooted in the Judeo-Christian tradition of the Anglosphere, is the only political ideology with a detailed map that leads out of the wokeness wilderness and back to a flourishing civilization. Classical liberalism is to be praised for its defense of individual liberty, but that is the extent of what it does. Demanding individual freedom is not a detailed map. At best, classical liberalism is a single line on the page. Above the line, written in positive green ink, is the phrase individual freedom. Below the line in negative.
Actually, I will just say one thing because I'm trying to think through, and I don't think Bruce particularly covers this. So it's an area that I don't feel I'll be stepping on his toes, just adding more information, which is always great, right? Is I actually agree with David's assessment here when you're talking about just, right, classical liberalism, because it is not enough. I firmly agree with, and I mean, I'm more than willing to hear more pushback that may convince me or sway me otherwise. Once again, I have an open mind. I'm willing to change my opinion based on, if I'm presented with good ideas and good information, good evidence to back up the claims. But once again, liberalism by itself, right, that individual freedom, that's not enough, which is why me personally, right, I'm privy to all these preferences in terms of how we interact and deal with each other socially and economically, and why I haven't chosen to identify as a classical liberal, as much as I definitely share a lot of in common with them, or even a conservative, because there's parts of me that share a lot in common with some conservatives, right? And some of the things that they cherish or promote, right, or adhere to, some of the ideas. But to me, the reason why I call myself a libertarian is because libertarians, the philosophy of liberty, I think they've actually done a much better job in terms of not just saying, what government should do. Like, well, first of all, a fully intellectually honest, right, libertarian is basically an anarchist, right? Because you can't you can't try to legitimize something that is illegitimate. And once again, that's a topic for another day. But the beautiful thing about the principles of the philosophy of liberty, the fundamental principles is, and the three core tenets, which is self-ownership, property rights, and the non-aggression principle. That's where I think now Christianity definitely can give you even more and enhance the non-aggression principle and give you great meta stories and narratives that can paint the picture in your mind that makes it much more conducive. But bare minimally, the one thing about libertarian philosophy, right, and those three core principles, it is at the very least, it's a good foundational premise in how we deal with each other with an underlying ethical and moral foundation built and baked into the cake, built into the philosophy, right? So it's not just a matter of, like individual rights. You can do whatever you want. No, which, without that underlying Christian ethos, right? It could be bad, right? For society, for sure. And we see that today. It's omnipresent and all around us. But the beautiful thing about the philosophy of liberty is like I said, the principles of the non-aggression principle. That principle alone, which is don't use violence. So there is an underlying ethic built into the philosophy of liberty. Is it enough by itself? Once again, I would have to say maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe actually probably not. There probably does have to be more. But once again, that's one area where I'll just point out people like Stefan Molyneux who are stepping up to the plate with his modern secularist, right, non-mystical ethos in terms of how we deal with each other socially, economically, right, and the underlying ethics that should, make that the case and how we deal with each other is the universally preferable behavior, universally UPB. So there's a lot of people right now, or I shouldn't say a lot, but there are enough people out there right now that are really, really working hard to figure out what do we do beyond, the old world way of mysticism in terms of training how we think about things, which typically was religion. And the modern world, it's still religion, but it's completely different religion. It's the religion of the state, where the state is now your God, right? Your center of morality or ethics, which once again is a walking, talking contradiction. But it is one thing that I will say that where I do agree with some of the conservatives in some of the ways and sometimes is classical liberalism by itself maybe just isn't enough. But I will say it's a pretty damn good foundation. Well, libertarianism, the philosophy of liberty, I would say is an even better foundation. But anyways, let me continue on.
Red ink is the word restrictions. For the classical liberal, they feel that the first duty of government, and maybe its only role, is to promote policies that fall above the line. For the classical liberal, the freedom of the individual is the highest good, and therefore government should make protecting individual liberty their first responsibility. And again, that position, no matter how enticing in its simplicity, is not sufficient to deal with our current reality. Because here is our current reality. Society is literally falling apart. More specifically, good is being called evil, and evil is being called good. From encouraging suicide for people who are depressed to mutilating children who are confused, think of any of the hundreds of current claims that are being made by progressives. We are in a society where good is called evil and evil is called good. You cannot make personal freedoms the first priority of government when society has literally forgotten the core virtues that make personal freedom beneficial and sustainable. Classical liberalism wants government to promote unfettered individual liberty. But the absence of virtue, in the absence of the knowledge of the good, well, when you have unfettered personal freedom, well, that's going to lead to the end of freedom itself, and ultimately societal ruin. Of course, there are going to be those who yell, hey, why do you get to decide what good is? Why should government promote your idea of virtue? And my answer is very simple. Because it worked. You don't have to be a religious person to recognize factual evidence. Look at the countries of the world that produce the greatest prosperity, equality, and freedom for their people. The single common denominator in that was in their past, they actively and explicitly promoted Judeo-Christian virtues using the principle of toleration, which accompanies Anglo-conservatism. But now compare. It's been just two generations, around 60 years, since explicit Christian virtues have been removed from the public sphere. It's been 2 generations since the ideas of classical liberalism and its focus on freedom alone have reigned. And now we can't even determine whether women exist in reality. Here's what the conservative sees. The conservative looks at the classical liberal's scrap of paper with its single line on it, dividing good freedom from bad restrictions, and the conservative pushes that paper aside. And he pulls out his detailed map. The conservative points out that individual liberty is on his map, but there are a number of necessary stops along the way before you can reach that destination. In fact, the conservative knows that individual liberty can only be a temporary destination if you don't get there by a very specific route. It is a route that must run through the Judeo-Christian tradition, because over thousands of years, it's been tested and proven that it truly is best for societal flourishing. And it's a road that's traveled as part of a family and part of a nation, because on that journey with your family and with the community of nation, you learn about mutual loyalty and your obligation to assist one another. Classical liberalism says, give me my personal freedom. Conservatism says, yes, give me my personal freedom, but let's use my map showing how to get to be free together for the greatest societal flourishing. Individually alone cannot help a nation in crisis, but conservatism can. Thank you.
Good job. Give the man applause. I think he presented a pretty good case.
Can you hear me all right? Okay. Thank you for coming. David Haskell is one of the best human beings that I know. He has made himself a servant of God, of his family, of his community, of his country. But Dave is also a conservative. And many conservatives carry something dark inside their hearts. And that is this: the conviction that everyone must live like them.
Mm-hmm.
Dave and I are buddies. If you hear the occasional jab or insult tonight, you can take it as a term of affection. We agree, the two of us, about a great many things, but we don't agree about this. And as Dave suggested, this may be the thing upon which the fight turns.
And actually, let me just point this out first and foremost. This is the beautiful thing, and even as Bruce is pointing out, some of the things that the conservative promotes, right, can seem pretty dark. No doubt about that. In that area, I definitely agree with Bruce here. But once again, at the bare minimum, this is why we have to deal with each other as individuals rather than just a mere representation of their particular idea or ideology of choice, right? David, the individual, the human himself, regardless of what he chooses to identify or align with in terms of whether it's politics or ideology or even religion, is willing to engage in verbal discussions and debate rather than, right? Or at least at this point, rather than, pick up the proverbial gun in the room, because then you've taken any chance of discourse or dialogue off of the table entirely, right? The minute you pull out the proverbial gun, well, okay, the talking's over, right? And that is no basis or starting point to figure out how you create a free and flourishing society, obviously. But I want to just reiterate, I said this early on, but I just want to reiterate here, in particular, in defense of David Haskell, because I don't know the man enough personally to say this, that he is genuinely a full-throated representative of the kind of things he said there. He could also be, just like what Bruce did for Jordan Peterson when they had that kind of debate regarding Bill C-16. I'm not sure if you folks remember that. But basically, Bruce, nobody would pick up, nobody wanted to take the other side of the debate against Jordan Peterson's stance at the time, right? Freedom of speech and not being forced or coerced into using particular pronouns and stuff, right? But Bruce, even though he was on Jordan Peterson's side, to give Jordan Peterson the opportunity to present his case, he said, you know what? I'll play devil's advocate and I'll steel man the shit. And I think he did. I think Bruce did an exceptional job. Just like if that's the case here tonight, I think David is doing an exceptional job of steel manning the case of the conservative, or once again, this would have been, or when Bruce Pardy was steel man the case for the woke mob, or targeting people for using improper pronouns stuff. So once again, no matter what you hear from David or Bruce, right? Especially if you're a liberty or a freedom kind of a person, don't get mad at David. Please don't go insulting the man on social media or anything like that based on anything you hear him present, right? Even if it's something that you vehemently disagree with or might even piss you off. Once again, these are people that are engaging in the battle of ideas. And very few people are open to do that these days. So give the men the respect that they deserve. Anyways, just going to continue on.
Because there are these two forces working together to try and resist the woke, to try to resist the dissolving of Western civilization. Now, this debate is put in terms, as Barry was describing, of virtue versus freedom. But that is not the specific question that is in front of us.
Here we go.
You know, one might argue that as the so-called, and I've called them this, the so-called virtue people would say that in order to be free inside your heart or in your mind, that perhaps you must be virtuous first. That maybe you need discipline. Maybe you need insight so as not to give in to your base desires or your animal instincts. Maybe so. That is not the question this debate is about.
Exactly. Really important.
So what is it about? Here's the resolution. Be it resolved that as wokeism destroys the West, the first responsibility of government is to foster a virtuous society rather than to protect individual liberty.
Mm-hmm.
What is the most important word in that resolution? It's not virtue, and it's not liberty. The most important word in the resolution is government.
Exactly.
This debate is about whether the government should require you to behave virtuously. I have news. That's what it's doing now.
Right? So Bruce will definitely go on and expand on and elaborate on this message. But yeah, I just want to get a couple cents in here real quick. Is exactly, think about what the woke mobsters, right? The cult of wokeism, right? These proponents of DEI, you know who we're talking about today, right? Are they not doing the exact same thing? Seeking to use the state, which once again, clarification of terms here, folks, and Bruce did so, right? Basically, government is force, right? Government, right? So should, virtue people, now right now the conservatives are claiming that they want to be the virtue people, but the woke people right now, who are the ones that are actually in control of most of the mechanisms of power, right, in these institutions, they're claiming the same thing. that they should use government force as a means to impose virtue on people. But anyways, once again, no grandstand here. Let's give Bruce his time.
A while back, I caught up with an old friend. She was having romantic trouble, wanted to talk. It was a fairly new relationship, and she wasn't happy with the way it was going. Here's what she said to me, and these are her exact words. She said, "He won't take charge in the relationship. And when he does," she said, "he does it wrong." I may have laughed. And I laughed because it's absurd. Why is it absurd? Because you want two things at once. You want to give somebody control, and then you want to control how they do it. If you give somebody control, they have control over what happens. And that's the way government works. If government is going to foster a virtuous society, it's going to foster a virtuous society that it thinks is virtuous. And that's what it has been doing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know the conservatives will say, well, that's not what we mean. We don't mean those virtues. We mean these virtues. But you don't get to pick, because the mandate is the thing that you've given, the job. You've given the government. The government is there, you say, to do this fostering. And by the way, there is no action that governments take that is not coercive.
Oh, beautiful, Bruce. Beautiful.
We can get more into that a little bit later.
Mm-hmm. And how?
As Thomas Sowell said, the most basic question is not what shall be done, but who decides what shall be done.
Right.
Dave's answer is the government. And my answer is you.
Right on.
You shall decide what happens in your life and how you choose to behave. And in any event, the conservatives seem to have a very strange idea about what virtue is. As I said, Dave has made himself a servant of God, family, community, country. And how did he do that? Well, I don't know exactly. But he came to understand something and then made a choice.
Yeah.
Perhaps conservatives haven't watched enough Harry Potter. Sirius Black, the character that turns into a wolf, says this to Harry Potter. He says, "The world is not divided into people who are good and people who are bad. We all have light and dark within us.
Yep.
What matters is the part we choose to act on." And the most important words in...
Actually, I will just point out that that is one of another very important message that's sent through multiple areas of the Bible as well, right? So this is where there is some definitely overlap. But of course, when you're talking about today, because of the separation of church and state, when you're talking about the church these days, the church has no pretense of authority, right? It is a wholly voluntary interaction, right? They cannot impose, not saying this was the case in the past, but churches cannot impose themselves on you, right? The churches don't have police forces, right? Jail cells, courts, all. So, gangs of mindless order followers, right? Well-armed ones that'll have that. But yes, both sides here would definitely be in agreement as far as that goes. Anyways, let me keep playing.
That statement are we choose. Virtuous behavior requires the freedom to choose. The virtue is in the choice that you make.
Mm.
If you are not allowed to make the choice,
Hmm.
you're not virtuous, you're obedient. A virtuous society requires that your government stick its nose somewhere else and allow you to make your decisions over your own life.
And that, to me, is one of the most important points I think made during this entire debate, right? Is, of course, I mean, I'm all about virtue. I try to be virtuous. I've failed. Once again, I acknowledge the fact that, yes, all human beings are fallible. I mean, the Bible tells us that. We're all sinners, right? But yes, even when I was raising my kids, I seen people who thought they were going to raise their sons in particular. Like I have 2 sons. And boys, can tend to get into a little bit more trouble and stuff, right? Have the potential to do less virtuous things, although I guess it can kind of some overlap in that area, depending on the age range and stuff, I guess, right? And the particular household. But yes, I've watched parents try to raise kids to be virtuous by using the stick, by using intimidation, by using violence, right? Spare the rod, right? Spoil the child, right? Some Old Testament shit, right? But I've seen that. I've seen that. But I recognize not just in my own life, that doesn't work. That's not very effective. Matter of fact, sometimes it has the opposite effect, right? But even for those who had good intentions and hoped the best, well, not saying it can happen, right? But it's a rare outlier and exception that you can force, right? I don't even think that's even possible. But once again, because I don't like to eliminate anything entirely, let's just say it's even remotely possible. Highly improbable at the very least. But I chose a different path. With my sons, I chose to lead by example, right? And to teach them what virtue is all about and to let them see in the real world with real world examples how all those scenarios play out and what it means to be virtuous, right? A person can take pride. My sons can take pride in their virtuous habits and behaviors and stances they take, not because dad forced them to, right? Think about what that would do to their own personal self-confidence or self-esteem even if they believe themselves. The only reason why is because they were scared of what dad would do, right? Or even if they were scared of what society. No. To be virtuous means means that you must be willing to do that, right? Regardless of the circumstances. And that is a very key point, right? And that's one area where I think Bruce really hammered home the message. And yeah, you can't impose virtue on people. Matter of fact, it's more than likely 99.9% of the time going to have the direct opposite effect. So great point, Bruce. Great point. And something that's really, really important that people need to know.
It's the only way forward, and it's the only way out of this dilemma that we have. If these forces who are opposed to the collapse of Western civilization are to triumph, then we have to get onto the same page. And the problem is that the classical liberals or the people who are inclined that way think that our problem is too little freedom. And the conservatives that Dave represents believe that the problem is too much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. So anyways, before we continue on, folks, I just wanted to check and see if anyone's got any questions that you want to pose. And I'll take a couple minutes there before I start back. But hey, if I don't see a whole lot of comments down below, or I should say questions or anything, or anything that you have as it pertains to what's been said so far, then I'll just continue on. And I recognize we're at just over almost an hour and 10 minutes. So I'll keep going for at least probably up to the 2-hour mark. And if we haven't covered it in its entirety during that time frame, then I'll probably tie up the live stream and maybe do a part 2, because I don't want to drag this. It's already a fairly long debate as it is. And once again, I don't want people to get get to the point where they're just it's just too much for them to think they're going to consume. They'll scroll on by kind of thing. Although I got to tell you, that's another area where I think more and more people are realizing actually to be properly educated, informed, enlightened, yeah, it definitely requires more than a 5 or 10 minute snippet or segment, right? That's just the nature of the beast. But anyways, yeah. Anyways, never mind. I'll just actually continue on playing in the name of for time's sake, right? I'll just continue on playing and maybe get some questions after if we get through this entirely, right?
45 minutes apiece. Start out with David and followed by but the thing is that you'll see as time goes on tonight, there's going to be some.
So basically, I know you can't really hear what this guy's saying. He didn't have a microphone all the time, but basically, as you can see on the clock behind him, he's going to give each participants 45 minutes in total.
Now, Bruce has called into question whether or not we need a government.
And of course, whenever they stop speaking, they don't have to use their entire 45 minutes all at once. You know, you can use 10 minutes of it. And then when you're done speaking, the other guy steps up, his clock starts, and then it stops when he's done and it goes back to the other guy. So basically they have 45 minutes each in total to go back and forth with each other. So now that I've clarified that, let me just play. I got to turn this down just a little bit here.
So we have to make a choice, and we have to say, do we want to go back to tribalism? You see, you have three choices when we look at how a country is governed. You can either be globalist, which is an imperialist, which says that everybody in the world is going to be under a central authority. We saw it with Rome. The Nazis tried that. Then we had nationalism. Nationalism said that, yes, we agree that as a people we'll agree to be governed. The alternative is tribalism. And that seems to be what Bruce is suggesting. Because outside of a governing system, you get tribalism. And a governing system says we actually need to agree on a set of values and virtues that will unify our population. Now, what he's suggesting is that the Judeo-Christian tradition that I'm advocating isn't sufficient. So let me dig into that a little bit. I'm arguing that the government's first responsibility should be the promotion.
Well, let me just say in terms of the whole tribalism thing there, once again, sure, Bruce will answer that with his own words, obviously, but just my thoughts off the top of my head is that's exactly and precisely what we're functioning under now, right? It's pure, full-on tribalism. That's what identity politics is literally all about. It is pitting people into these columns, right? These tribes, and creating division and then pitting them against each other. Whereas, once again, I'm not speaking for Bruce here. I'm speaking for the libertarian position, which I think is pretty close to what Bruce would be aligned with. Is no, it's about the individual at the end of the day. And of course, we're all part of some greater size in terms of groups, whether it's your family, your community, but at the end of the day, it's not about tribalism. It's about respecting each other as a sovereign individual. That's really what it is at the end of the day. So there's that, David. There's that. Anyways, once again, let me just continue playing.
A virtue. And I've been very clear about the kind of virtue the government should be promoting. It's virtue that explicitly reflects the Judeo-Christian tradition. And if you're someone who doesn't practice Christianity, you may be hesitant to support that position. But as I've already explained, you don't need to believe in Christianity to support my position. You just need to believe in evidence.
Sorry, one more thing, folks, and then I'm going to let it go on for a little while here. But if you'll notice here, and I'm sure you folks have, David in his defense, and you got to remember, this is the question is as it pertains to government, but in his defense, David, right, whether knowingly, I would suspect probably, or as just part of the debate, is putting forth a lot of information or in full thorough defense of Christianity. But Christianity is not government. And if you talk to a lot of Christians, well, they'll tell you that, outright, right? Don't place no gods above the real God is what a Christian would tell you. And the state is literally blasphemy. The worship of the state, the belief in that authority as being, the supreme ruler or the supreme being, or supreme in terms of ethics or morality, that is the antithesis of what Christianity stands for. So I'm kind of with Dave here in his full-throated defense of Christianity and some of the great teachings that are contained within Christianity. But once again, Christianity, thankfully, is not government.
And the countries of the world with the highest levels, highest standards of living, the greatest security, the most personal freedom, and the maximal tolerance and equality, regardless of creed or color, have one thing in common. They were nations in which a supermajority of the population was Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And the laws and traditions of that country, up until about 60 years ago, explicitly reflect the virtues and values of Christianity. When we look at immigration in the world today and how it runs only one way towards nations founded on Christian virtue, we see that people outside the West are convinced by the evidence. But there may be some in this audience, certainly Bruce, who's not convinced. In fact, some of you may be thinking, if it's applied today, if Christianity is applied today as it was in the past, it's going to make society worse, not better. Luckily, this is a topic that I've been researching for about 20 years. So let me put on my hat as a sociologist of religion, and I'll rattle off a few facts, and it'll allow us to more closely examine how Christianity today impacts society. In Canada and the United States, study after study has shown that Christians, specifically conservative Christians, give more to charity and volunteer more than any other group. In Canada, according to Statistics Canada, practicing Christians have charitable giving 3 times that of non-religious, and they volunteer twice as much and for 40% more time. In the mid-2000s, the Red Cross did a study of charitable work done by religious organizations in the developing world. They found that unlike other aid organizations doing charitable work, Christian organizations, quote, assisted anyone regardless of their religious affiliation. Let's move on to internal relationships. Practicing conservative Christians in the West have the highest levels of satisfaction and stability in their marriage. According to the work of sociologist Nancy Gallagher, conservative Christian fathers most actively engage in the raising of their children. Children raised in the homes of practicing Christians, on average, have the highest levels of pro-social behavior, the lowest levels of antisocial behavior, and the lowest levels of addiction. Conservative Christian families have significantly less domestic abuse and child abuse than the population at large. According to numerous studies, men who are practicing Christians are about 70% less likely to abuse their female partners. Similarly, a recent study at Harvard and Redeemer University showed that Christian universities in Canada and in the US have the lowest incidence of sexual assault. Let's look at some specific attitudes necessary for wider societal functioning. For society to function, people must be able to get along. They need to forgive each other when they mess up. Among groups in the West, conservative Christians have been shown to be the most supportive of forgiveness for those who have harmed them. Recent surveys by Harvard and Gallup show that close to 90% of Christians agree forgiveness is very important. In experiments involving actual forgiveness conducted at the University of North Iowa, Christians in the samples, quote, emerged significantly further in their forgiveness process toward a specific offender than Muslims and atheists in the sample. And while Christians excel at forgiveness, polling by Pew Research shows progressives, in general, are 3 times more likely to end a friendship over a political position. Now let's move on to mental states. Practicing conservative Christians, on average, have the highest levels of happiness and life satisfaction in North America. This is also the case in Europe. In fact, Carol Graham of the Brookings Institute found in the European communities, the happiness of those who were not religious increased when living in areas with a greater proportion of practicing Christians. In addition to cornering the market on happiness, conservative Christians who attend...
And if you think about it, and once again, I'm sure you folks are catching on to this too, is he's making, once again, an excellent job, by the way, David, if you get a chance to see this, doing a great job of putting a full-throat defense for Christianity. And I'm right there with you. But the reason why, whether you're talking about happiness or, when you're talking about less chance of violence towards their wives and stuff, if you think about it, the one underlying common factor that encompasses all of that is the absence of force, right? It's the absence of using force, violence, coercion, or theft as your means to an end. That's why typically, the Christians, right, because of the 10 commandments and all that stuff, and those great meta stories and narratives and how we should treat each other socially and economically, and that promise of reward for doing the right thing now, that reward in the future for doing the right thing now, all those things are incentivizing people to treat each other with dignity and respect, and in the absence of violence. That's what creates that peace, that harmony, that happiness, right? It's the absence of force. And of course, we've all lived our own lives. And of course, you're usually probably your happiest, most well-adjusted, on your best behavior, and a really, really likable person and doing really well, typically, for the most part, in the absence of people using violence or force or coercion or theft or fraud against you, right? Of course, that is a recipe for happiness, or at least it can be, has the potential. Whereas, yes, the minute you enter force into the equation, definitely takes down the happiness level quite a few notches, right? Anyways, let's continue on.
Church regularly have among the highest scores of mental wellness. Related to mental health, the effect also goes in the opposite direction. According to a 2020 study by Pew Research, the highest rates of diagnosed mental illness is found among progressives. For example, 56% of progressive white women aged 18 to 29, 56% have been diagnosed with a mental health condition.
Shame.
Let's move on from mental states to physical actions. According to research by Baylor University sociologist Byron Johnson, practicing conservative Christians have the lowest rates of crime in the United States. In his study of convicts at prison, Dr. Johnson also found that the most effective treatment programs for rehabilitation were those that were explicitly Christian and taught Christian virtues. On the other hand, in a massive study using national data sample, researchers at the University of Cincinnati found the more someone identifies as a liberal, the higher their level of criminal participation. Now, let me slow down a bit. Christian virtue has a significant effect on crime reduction. You'd think that the government might be interested in that. But they're not. But at least we have diversity and inclusion. Let's move from the data at the level of the individual to data at the level of countries, because Bruce has caused us to question whether the virtues of Christianity and conservatism will work at the country level. We already know.
Actually, that is the perverse incentive structure of the state, right? I'm just thinking of it. He's talking about, you would think that the state would want reduced violence and all this stuff. No, actually, the public sector, the bureaucracy, right? Whether you're talking about court personnel, lawyers, judges, I mean, there's a lot of people making some good bank over having a high churn out of criminal activity, right? If all that criminal activity subsided entirely, well, these people wouldn't have much of a job or of a position, and wouldn't be getting that big, juicy paycheck, right? Or that nice golden goose parachute for a pension that they're going to get from the time they retire till the time they pass away, right? Adjusted for inflation and all that. Right? This is the thing. It's the perverse incentive structure of government, which is, once again, that creates this scenario. We can even expand that out into the healthcare field, right? But we'll just stick with the particular topic at hand. Anyways, let me get back to playing this, because this is great. Like I say, some great information being presented here, and some definite food for thought. Whether you agree or disagree with either participant in this debate, is definitely, bare minimally, you're going to get some good intellectual vigor and some thought-provoking stances from both of these gentlemen. So once again, kudos to both of them for doing this.
It's very popular knowledge that slavery in both Britain and in the United States was abolished because of the political activities of conservative Christians. In fact, related to the US, in 1993, Robert Fogel won the Nobel Prize because he found political activism of conservative Christians in America was the single greatest factor in freeing the slaves. But that was in the past. Is there any way to determine if practicing Christians today are still the champions of freedom and equality for all? Well, let me see if I can give it a try. 5 years ago, Pew Research Center surveyed citizens from across the world and asked about their support for freedom of expression. Here's what they found. It turned out that the countries with the greatest number of Christians had the greatest support for freedom of expression. The number one country for number of Christians is the United States, also has the greatest support for freedom of expression. In Europe, the number one country for practicing Christians is Poland. Again, greatest support for freedom of expression. I'm going to refer to just one last study. And again, we're looking at, does Christian virtue produce freedom? We need a government. We need it to give us something to hold on to and some values to uphold. So let me talk about the work of Dr. Robert Woodbury. Dr. Robert Woodbury, professor at Baylor University, wanted to discover, why does one country become free and democratic when another, often directly beside it, with similar geography, cultural background, natural resources, why does that country suffer from authoritarian rule when another is democratic?
Actually, let me just say this right now. Sorry for the interruption there again, folks, but no, we don't need government. What we need, right, are people with, whether it's those Christian values or UPB values, right, in the secular realm in terms of, Stefan Molyneux's philosophical endeavor, or once again, libertarian values, bare minimum, right? Bare minimum. And of course, your society is going to be much, much better if you step above and beyond anything at least baseline in terms of the bare minimum and how we should interact with each other, social or economically. But it's not that we need government. It's not that we need force, right? Like even as a parent, I even had this written down. It's kind of remind me of it. So even as a parent, right? If you relied on solely using force as your means to an end to raise your son, and knowing the real world examples are undeniable, but if you knew that you could use force all your entire life, from the time your child is born till they leave your home, scaring the shit out of them, abusing them, and forcing them to be virtuous. Well, if they don't choose to be virtuous on their own, of their own volition, by their own choice, then once they leave your house, or even if they're just big enough, right, and that threat of force, it might still be on the table, but then they have the equal opportunity to use force against you. Well, how well will that work out? Because now you've taught them that force is somehow a moral or ethical means to an end, as long as that end you perceive of is some greater good or some absolute goal that we should all strive for. So once again, that alone should show you, right? And as a parent, that's the thing. Not everyone is into the state and the philosophy of liberty. Not a lot of people understand, and even psychology and stuff. But most people understand, especially if you're a parent or you've been around people who have been parents, that it doesn't work out to try to force virtue on your children. And as a matter of fact, the best way, right, if you want to grow up in an area, like in a place that is virtuous or filled with virtuous people, it's not force that's going to create that. It's that leading by example and that live, let live mentality. While at the same time, this is the other flip side of that is, yes, I'll leave you alone. You do your thing. But at the same time, I will defend myself if you ever try to impose yourself on me or use force, fraud, theft, or coercion towards me. That's the other thing. That's what holds each other personally accountable and responsible, right? Is walk softly, but carry a big stick. Don't use violence. Don't use the state. But at the same time, you must let other people know in your household, in your community, that if you choose violence as your means to an end, or you try to impose yourself on me, you will be met with that. And that has a much better check and balance on their tendencies of control or authority than what? The pretense of, I'll call somebody, right, that may or may not intervene or may not be here at a time that actually would help, alleviate the situation or the circumstance. No. And once again, it's all about personal responsibility. And end of the day, anyways, let me continue on, because once again, this is just great stuff. I hope you folks are enjoying yourself. Really appreciate all you folks who have joined the stream. Like I said, this is really, really good stuff. Really good stuff.
Liberal, free, So to determine that answer, he spent 14 years assembling historical, demographic, and economic data on nations of the developing world. Finally, in 2012, he published the summary of his findings in the American Political Science Review, one of the top journals for political science. The title of his article is this: The Missionary Roots of Liberal Democracy. Here's the startling discovery that Dr. Woodbury made. Historically and statistically, the political and social activism of conservative Protestant missionaries in developing nations was the single greatest influence on the rise and spread of stable democracy. According to Woodbury's empirical findings, these conservative Protestants who engaged in political and social activism were, quote, a crucial catalyst initiating the development and spread of religious liberty, mass education, mass printing, thereby creating the conditions that made stable democracy more likely. So, does Christianity applied to politics assist freedom? Should a government support those kind of virtues? I leave Bruce with a challenge. What is your empirical evidence that classical liberalism produces societal flourishing?
We need a government. Now, I have some friends, good friends, who are anarchists, anarcho-capitalists, and they make a good case. I'm not quite there yet. But the liberal position, I'm going to use the word liberal as opposed to classical liberal, because liberal is the word that meant those people who supported the idea of liberty. So don't get confused between the two different versions of.
Oh, what happened there now? Well, while I, so what are we at? 54. While I check and see what's going on here, I will just say, actually, 54:11. I will just say, so this is actually kind of a good time to point this out, and I'm so glad to be able to be privy to watching Bruce on his intellectual, philosophical, I should say, journey. I guess both intellectual and philosophical, really, if you think about it, because it's like watching my own self go through this, and I'm still, once again, not making any claim that I somehow figured everything out and it's all done. It's just a matter of waiting for everyone else to catch up. I'm constantly learning every day, and I gotta say, it's really difficult for a lot of people, which is even people who turn towards learning about liberty genuinely identify as a minarchist, right? Which is basically I would say almost identical. A minarchist is basically almost identical to the classical liberal, right? Basically just want the state as the ultimate arbiter, trader, or referee, per se. The night watchman state, where, like Bruce is saying, its sole role and function is to protect individual liberty, right? And to adjudicate when there are people who step outside the bounds and do cause or inflict harm or impose theft or other or immoral acts on other people, right? That is what a minarchist is, and that's what a classical liberal is in terms of in the political realm. But once again, here's the thing, and I think eventually we're all going to get there eventually. I know Bruce is too smart of a guy, too intelligent, too intellectually honest with himself to not eventually get there, right? And I'm sure if he's been talking to Jeffrey Tucker, he might very well be the one that'll help Bruce get to that final destination on this journey. Or, like I say, we're never really fully at that destination, but at least get to the point where you understand, you know what? But I get it. Listen, I totally get it. I mean, Bruce and David here are standing on a stage where I would suggest most of the people in the audience, or anyone that's going to sit and watch and listen, even if they're a classical liberal or a conservative, are not going to be really susceptible or more or willing to digest something that's going to break the entire paradigm of everything that they were taught throughout the course of their entire, not just their adult lives, but since they were a child. So I get how difficult it is to break your mind free from some of these paradigms that are just massively entrenched and horizontally enforced by almost everyone in our peer group or in our communities or our societies. I get how difficult that is. I totally get how difficult that is, which is why it's really important to surround yourself with people that bare minimally have at least a live, let live mentality and are willing to engage in these ideas and willing to have their former premises or notions challenged. That is so vitally important, people. To have an open mind is so important. Doesn't require that everyone has to be that way, because once again, once people see, right, once the typical less informed masses see how well people can function in the absence of the state, in the absence of this big giant monopoly of force or violence, at some point in time, just like when slavery was abolished and we've lived post-slavery, post-human ownership, once you get beyond the belief in the state, the belief in government, I think we will all get to the point where, hopefully at least, where we're like, holy shit, I can't believe I used to believe that stuff. I just can't believe it, right? But hey, don't blame yourself. Every single one of us, right? We're constantly inundated with those kind of religious teachings in terms of telling you that the state is your final authority, your ultimate authority, right? And the pretense of what is the greater good, right? We've all been susceptible to that, like I said, from the time we were very young children. So don't beat up on yourselves. Don't get mad at yourself, right? Correct your thinking, right? Maybe even correct some of your habits if it's conducive with statism, right? Correct some things in your life. For sure. Just like what Jordan Peterson says, right? Start cleaning up your room for sure. But don't allow, right, the fear of the unknown or the adoption of new knowledge, right, to shy away from it. Because once again, that's the only thing that has ever helped us Canadians, or sorry, not just Canadians, us human beings escape living in the world of nothing but like in the state of nature, right? Where might makes right. That's what separates us from the animal kingdom, morality and ethics, and a full grasp and understanding in what it even means to be a free human being. So once again, and I have no qualms with Bruce in terms of his journey. I get it. I totally get it. And I can see he's basically on the precipice now. And I will just say that to Bruce and even to David, man, trust me, even as a guy that's very religious and holds some great values very near and dear to your heart, David, listen, I'm with you on the Christianity stuff, my friend. I'm with you. But once again, the state cannot be, right? If we're going to advance humans beyond beyond this old world or the antiquities way of thinking of things, right? Is if we're going to move beyond that, if we're going to evolve, and actually I've got my own little phrase or term that I've coined over the years, which is, I think we're living in Enlightenment era 2.0. And I'm pleased to see that David and Bruce and Jordan Peterson and all these people are contributors to this huge, seemingly small in comparison to some of the other ideologues, but it's huge in terms of the kind of people now are stepping up the plate to once again advance humans beyond this old world paradigm and line of reason and thinking. It's to me, it's a beautiful thing. Now it can be frustrating at times because we're actually in the middle of it. We haven't moved beyond it yet. We don't know what's on the other side of it yet. But once again, it's just amazing. And I'm, for one, very thankful to be able to watch these kind of intellectual journeys and philosophical journeys play out in real time. We live in such an amazing time and space, folks. I tell you, I know how bad things can be. Once again, trust me, I know that stuff's out there, right? And we still eventually, even after this live streams, we got to deal with that stuff. But this alone is such a beautiful thing to see this kind of development taking place. And like I say, these are people from academia who are themselves breaking free of the paradigm. Think about how difficult it is for them. Now, maybe a little bit more easy for Bruce because he seems like he had that kind of predisposed to that kind of personality trait like I had possessed as a kid. I didn't know what a libertarian was and all that stuff, but it seems like based on just the things I heard about his history and his growing up is and wanting to question authority, he was a little bit more susceptible to leaning more towards the philosophy of liberty, maybe a little bit quicker than David. Once again, this is just taking David at his word in terms of how he's presenting himself here. Who knows? David could be just as far along or maybe further. I can't say with any amount of certainty. But once again, this is just an amazing spectacle to behold. And after this is done, even if you don't share my particular live stream, bare minimally, just share this debate with a lot of people, because people, like I say, no matter who they are, no matter what leaning they have or ideological preference, if they have any reasonableness to them at all, share this particular debate with them, because it's very eye-opening. Hey, sit down as a family, make this, matter of fact, I can see, I can see getting entire, rent a community center, put this on a projector, make it a community event, invite a bunch of people over your home instead of watching the football game. Nothing against the football game, but put this bad boy on your big 65 or 70-inch TV and get people really up, excited about thinking about these things at such a deep level, because I know some ways it can be seem a little bit boring, but not when you think about the gravity and the kind of implications these conversations are going to have for all of humanity going forward. Let's really, as far as I'm concerned, these are exciting times. Anyways, let me just see if this is going to continue to play. I hope.
Liberal.
Yeah, there we go.
We're not talking about the modern illiberal, progressive liberal who's woke.
Right.
I'm not that kind of liberal. I'm the liberal who thinks that you own your own life.
Yeah.
So we need a government.
Nah.
And we all need values to live by.
That,
But
for
those
sure.
two things are not the same thing. Your values don't come from the state, for God's sake.
Well, they better not.
Humans are spiritual animals.
What's going on here? I see we're getting a little bit of a pause here once again. Let me see. Is there anything I can close up and see? Not sure what's going on. It looks like everything is actually going good. I don't see any warnings that my internet's having any issues. All right, let me try and see what happens here again. 54, 53. I'm probably going to have to just try reloading this. So I'm at 54, 53 right now. Yeah, just one sec, folks. We're going to give this another. There we go. Oh, wait, it stopped again. I wonder what's going on here. By the way, just so you folks know that actually you must be able to see it anyways. Yes, you can. So this is, once again, just to let you know that this particular video that I'm referencing here is from First Freedoms Canada. And once again, I see they've only got 39 follows over there. Maybe head on over there maybe after this live stream and give them a follow. And once again, check that video on Rumble. I'm just trying to, once again, see if I can't get this thing to start playing. Not really understanding what the heck is going on here. Okay, let's see if I just skip ahead just a bit here. No, that's not going to help either, is it? Okay, I'm just going to reload one more time, folks. And if I can't get it to work, very strange, isn't it? Very strange. So I'm not sure if you folks want to be patient and give me a couple more minutes, see if I can't figure this out. If not, I'll give it probably 5-10 more minutes. And if it doesn't straighten itself out by then, maybe I will just go ahead and tie this one up a little bit early, but it's not too bad. And maybe just deal with it as a part 2. Because once again, there's still quite a bit contained within this debate. And I definitely want to cover it in its entirety, because I consider this to be really, really a really important debate that, like I say, is very eye-opening and very enlightening. and something that a lot of people should be privy to. So just once again, I'm just going to see if I can't figure out what's going on here. Actually, let me just open another website and see if, no, the internet's fine. So actually, I wonder if I can do this. I wonder if I can try opening a different window. Okay, hold on. Hold on. Oh, no, that's my own. Sorry, that's not going to work. Maybe if I stop sharing and then go back in. So it's at 54:53. Okay, I'm going to do that then. So I'm going to reload it. Okay, it's actually playing. So I'm just going to bring it back on here, folks. I'm not sure what exactly happened there. Some small glitch, but if it's going to start working now, then let's get right back into it.
That the evidence probably does show
Here we go.
that
Thanks
people
for your
who
patience,
have a spiritual understanding of something, a belief system, who are maybe members of a religious community, probably on average fare better. I don't doubt that. I don't know for sure, but I don't doubt it. Once again, that is not the question here. I am not arguing against Christianity. Just to be clear, here's the classical liberal position. It is not that you should live your life as an atomized individual without relationships.
Exactly.
No. You should form relationships with the people around you, with friends and family.
Yep.
With community.
Of course.
With religions. You should come together with people who think like you, who believe like you. If you want to, live according to a code.
Yep.
If you want to.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Huh. Huh. This very well may be, I'm not 100% sure on that, but as soon as I took it out of the StreamYard sharing tab, it started working again. So I wonder if this is a streaming service related issue, which would be quite annoying because I pay a pretty good chunk of change for my streaming software, or for this streaming software. What is it at, like 70, almost $75 a month here, just to be able to record it in 1080p, not even 4K here anyways. But I don't know. Come on. 5609. Try one more time. And then if we're having more issues, I will not keep you folks waiting. I will once again just tie this up and go for a round 2 on another day. So what are we at? 5609. Let me try stopping the share one more time. All right. Maybe it's not the streaming software, because now it's not even working just on its standalone Rumble channel. Well, that's a bit of a bummer, isn't it? I would say so. Okay. All right. So, okay. Thanks, folks. Once again, I see we got quite a few people in the that's watching this. And once again, I do apologize for whatever has taken place that is now seemingly oddly made it so I can't play this video. It's highly frustrating. I'm still trying. But anyways, yeah, I'll probably just have to do this as a part 2. So a 2-part series, maybe that might be good, right? That might actually be good, because I was definitely going to go beyond the 2-hour timeline that I was typically looking at for this particular live stream. Well, I mean, I knew it might have gone beyond that anyways, considering the actual live stream itself, the debate, their actual debate was pretty much, 2 hours and 14 minutes. So yeah, there was no chance in heck of actually keeping it under 2 hours. So actually, maybe it will be ideal to start this up as a part 2 in a subsequent live stream. But anyways, I do want to say once again before I do close this up, that very appreciative of all participants, not just the folks that set up the RAND debate, the person that did the introduction, of course, the channels, this First Freedoms Canada, who I'm not sure if they were the ones that hosted it or did the recordings per se, but anyone that helped bring this debate to fruition, and of course the participants, and of course even the Augustine College, as I'm seeing what it's called there, the venue, David Haskell, Bruce Pardy, the presenter, all of the fine folks involved, not to mention even those who weren't privy to the debate, but have now kind of joined forces and talking amongst each other now, such as your Konstantin Kisin and Jordan Peterson and such. Like I say, it's just a beautiful thing, a beautiful spectacle to see all these great, beautiful minds coming together with one common theme. That's the one thing that's keeping this whole thing much more unified and cohesive, even though we're seeing people that like to identify on the right these days. But that's where we kind of got to separate ourselves, right? Like move away from that whole left-right thing. I think it's the wisest thing, whether even if you do identify as like the old school conservative, like David or something, or a classical liberal, or a libertarian, or any. Yeah, let's move away from the left and right, because we can see that is just is a means to divide us, right? And to pit us against each other. And the folks that are representing both sides are definitely doing a disservice to those of us who are critical thinkers and not ideologues, right? Not dogmatists, right? The one common theme, the one common factor, the one common principle that we all share is the willingness to engage in the marketplace of ideas, because we obviously have the intentions of not forming or creating society in our image or our name, but in the image of something that's conducive with human flourishment and individual sovereignty, right? And respect of the individual, right? I don't, unlike conservatives or even liberals or NDP, I don't want to, create a world where everyone are basically replicas or clones of me and do exactly what I do, say, or live, or how I live. No, but we do have to have, just like if we're going to participate in a game, you folks have probably heard me say this many times in the past too. The only reason why we will agree to actively participate with each other in a round of competition, whether it's a game, sporting event, or anything like that, is if we all have to follow the same rules, right? Because the minute somebody has the ability to escape or undermine those rules, well, that's the minute that tyranny is at your doorstep. How long it's going to be before they knock the door down? Nobody knows. Nobody can say, right? But that is the basis. That is the precipice for it to take place. So we have to all function in terms of ethics, in terms of how we socially, economically interact and cooperate with each other. We have to have the basis, the grounded rules that are the basis for that to actually flourish and take place, right? And that is what people think they need the state for. Historically, people believe, oh, well, you need the government, or at least within the last couple hundred years. Once again, that experiment, it was successful. It was a failure. There did depend on the point in time in history. You could say that there was all kinds of peaks and valleys. But the experiment has been run long enough that we can see that, yes, even those great ideas in terms of greatly minimizing and restraining and constraining the state, which is what the founding fathers of the U.S. did by writing it into the Constitution, and the way that was drafted sounded great in theory, and it did actually work for a while. But once again, the minute you leave that open, right, that power vacuum, the minute you create that area or venue for power, it's going to get filled eventually, which is why libertarians, anarchists, voluntarists, and a lot of modern critical thinkers, no matter how they align or identify politically or ideologically, are all coming to realize that yes, that is that one thing that seems to be at the core of all the issues we face today. Not to suggest that everything will become peachy cream and we will all be living in some libertopia in the future. But at the very least, we won't have the pretense that people have some kind of legitimate authority to impose themselves on us, right? Not to suggest that people won't seek out means or methods or structures in attempt to control and dominate us. But if we know that it's illegitimate and we believe in our mind what it is to be free is to be absent of force, coercion, theft, and servitude or subjugation, well, that's the best way to battle against it and to keep it at bay. The minute you introduce the beast into the room, aka the state, that monopoly of power in any particular jurisdiction, well, that's just going to be the time, because power is where the bad people are going to gravitate to. And that is undeniable at this point, regardless of who you are politically, where you align on the spectrum, or even your ideological preferences. That is humanity 101. And yeah, we're living in the 21st century, folks. It's time to throw off some of the shackles in the past, especially the ones that shackle our minds, and adopt our thinking to something that's much more critical and conducive with human flourishment, human development, and that evolution of liberty that we all should be striving for. Anyways, thank you, folks, for joining the live stream. Thank you, Bruce, once again, for your clarification. Hopefully you get a chance to check out this live stream. Hopefully I've done it justice. Once again, really appreciate, and same with you, David, and I mentioned Jordan Peterson and Konstantin as well. Any of those folks, once again, mad respect for all you folks for all you're doing and stepping up the plate, the kind of time, effort, and resources that you're putting into trying to help educate, inform, enlighten. And I'm a real happy guy that I can be a fellow traveler. And hopefully someday I'll get the opportunity to have a conversation with you folks as well. As for you folks in the chat, once again, you folks know that I've got a tremendous amount of respect for each and every one of you. I know you're all too on your own intellectual and philosophical journey, and I'm very much appreciative that you folks are here to help drive me, to listen to me as I rant from time to time, and once again to hopefully help inspire each other. So thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the week. Have a great weekend. And once again, I'm not sure exactly when I'll be putting out the part 2 for this one, but it won't be too far from now. So like I say, maybe even on the weekend, I might even get a chance to do it maybe a little bit later in the day to give maybe a chance for a larger audience while the actual live stream is taking place. So have yourself a good one. This is Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.